Monday night, my wife and my children will not be watching Raw because I am going to do something that is unthinkable. I'm going to leave you with my anger. Sleep well.
Well, the wrestling world in shock today. Former champion Chris Benoit found dead in his Atlanta home along with his wife and young son. Police now treating the discovery as a double murder-suicide. World Wrestling Entertainment says Benoit failed to show for 2 live events over the weekend, and apparently at least one suspicious text message sent to friends prompted wrestling officials to send police to his house.
Chris Benoit, one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, would permanently tarnish his reputation with the brutal execution of his wife and child. This loved and celebrated wrestler, a legend in the sport, would do something so monstrous WWF tried to delete him from the record books.
Therefore, other than my comments, there will be no mention of Mr. Benoit's name tonight. On the contrary, tonight's show will be dedicated to everyone who has been affected by this terrible incident.
Benoit was known in the circuit for his intensity and perfectionism. His talent and hard work outshined his lack of height. He was relatively short in comparison to the Goliaths of the WWF, but nobody worked harder. This cemented his professional moniker, the Rabid Wolverine. It was said that he was wrestling through and through. The only job he ever had in his life had been performing as a wrestler. Over a 3-day rampage, he would obliterate his family and himself from existence. First, he strangled his wife to death in a similar fashion to his finisher move, the Crippler Crossface. The following day, he would kill his own 7-year-old son by giving him Xanax and then smothering him. The next day, he took his own life by snapping his neck on a weighted cable machine he used to work out on. The last 2 searches on his computer included a Bible verse in which a son is resurrected and the quickest way to break your neck. There has always been speculation into why he did it. The most widely regarded theory, and one that was rife at the time, was that he exploded in a fit of roid rage.
Chris Benoit's home sits empty. Police and the curious are gone, but the mystery remains.
The greatest of all time.
Why did the famous professional wrestler methodically, over the course of a weekend, strangle his wife, suffocate his 7-year-old son, then hang himself? Anabolic steroids are one focus of the investigation, a controversial muscle-building substance found at the murder scene.
There were a lot of prescription medication.
Depression, paranoia, and violent outbursts known as roid rage are linked with steroid use.
However, the theory of roid rage has largely been disregarded in recent years, with many experts denying that roid rage even exists.
Death by steroids, roid rage worthy of after-school specials. But Dr. Norman Faust says, wait a second.
The horror stories about the medical claims, some of them are just frankly made up.
Dr. Faust, a bioethicist at the University of Wisconsin, says the anti-steroid movement is filled with hysteria and hype. Steroids were blamed when wrestler Chris Benoit killed himself and his family.
Prescribed testosterone for the pro wrestler previously.
You think it's fake?
I was told that steroids drove this wrestler to hit me, and that steroids gave NFL legend Lyle Alzado brain cancer. Faust says it's bunk. There's no correlation between steroid use and brain tumors?
Correct, none.
It was also said that Benoit had stopped taking steroids after the death of his best friend, Eddie Guerrero. Allegedly, drug testing in the sport since that death has been very strict.
History of suspected steroid use when it comes to pro wrestlers. How do you police these wrestlers?
Well, the way we do it now, back in February of last year, we instituted a wellness policy that not only polices steroids, but prescription drugs, or I should say the abuse of prescription drugs.
Is that just essentially blood tests that you administer? Or?
No, it's a urine test, blood test, things of that nature to determine all these factors, as well as we instituted as well a cardiovascular aspect in terms of heart disease or heart failure. So it's a very comprehensive test. It was put into place back in February. And the last test that Chris Benoit took of a random nature was in April, which he was totally negative.
But others suggest drug testing is merely the company covering their own backs and no real testing is in place. Benoit, for example, had 10 times the testosterone level of an average man at the time of his death, according to Talksport.com. Alcohol was also touted as a possible factor, as half-drunk wine bottles were found at the residence. However, perhaps the most plausible explanation is that Chris Benoit was suffering from chronic CTE.
Benoit may have had a condition called chronic traumatic encephalopathy. This is also called CTE, although the experts were not in agreement about this. Nobody, however, is denying that his brain was severely damaged, right? So the dispute is just about whether he technically had CTE or not. CTE is often thought of as having stages. The first stage is characterized by headaches, difficulty concentrating, and vague symptoms. The next stage is characterized by depression, explosivity, and memory loss. Then we see executive dysfunction, and finally, dementia, language disturbance, and aggression. The aggression can be quite pronounced in that final stage. So worse than what we see even with the explosivity talked about before.
His brain was studied by Christopher Nowinski, who showed that his brain was that of an 85-year-old with dementia. It was thought that numerous headshots with a steel chair had contributed, and this move was later removed from the organisation.
The head injuries were considered to be a much larger contributor, if not the only contributor, to his actions. Of course, we really don't know, but that's one of the theories. Benoit had sustained a number of head injuries over the course of 22 years as a wrestler. Tests were done on Benoit's brain at a place called Sports Legacy Institute. The results of those tests indicated that Benoit's brain resembled the brain of an 85-year-old man with dementia. Damage was found in every section of his brain. Experts concluded that Benoit had an advanced form of dementia.
The death of his best friend Eddie Guerrero also caused him emotional turmoil and depression. He was said to sob uncontrollably at times, and CTE may have contributed to a lack of emotional control. Perhaps all of these things accumulated in the tragedy. The intensity, the depression, the substances, the alcohol. Perhaps he snapped under the pressure, causing the worst atrocity in wrestling history.
Good evening. Tonight, this arena here in Corpus Christi, Texas, was to have been filled to capacity with enthusiastic WWE fans. Tonight's storyline was to have been the alleged demise of my character, Mr. McMahon. However, in reality, WWE superstar Chris Benoit, his wife Nancy, and their son Daniel are dead. Their bodies were discovered this afternoon in their new suburban Atlanta home.